Hi, I'm Joseph, and I'm the managing editor of Salon. Joining me today is Chef Lidia. The James Beard Award winner is regarded as a leading chef of Italian cuisine. She's also an Emmy Award-winning public television host and a best-selling cookbook author. In her new book, Felidia, she shares recipes from her flagship restaurant for the very first time. Welcome, Lidia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So as I've said, you've been writing cookbooks for 30 years, but this is the very first time that you shared recipes from your flagship restaurant. Why was it time now?
Well, you know, for Lidia, we opened in 1981. And that's where I became chef, the young chef. I started there. Even though we had restaurants before, I was not the chef. So I'm the chef. It's Felidia. It's 1981. And we're still going very strong. And that's not usual for a restaurant, you know, to last that long. So I thought it was maybe about time that we pulled it all together. Why are we still there? What are the recipes that we cannot take off the menu? And in a way, say thank you to the team that made Felidia what it is, because it's all about team.
So you're the owner of multiple restaurants in New York. There's Becco and Del Posto, plus Felidia, and the whole Italy chain.
Sure.
So you've been open in Felidia for 38 years, which is a very long time. Most restaurants in New York close after about 5 years. So what's the secret to your success?
It's been a long time. I think, you know, I don't know. I guess maybe it's passion. I love what I do. I think the welcoming that we have from our guests, our customers, feeling relevant maybe out there in the food. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm conscious about good food. I'm conscious about enough food. I'm conscious about people that don't have food. So for me, all of that, you know, it's very essential and important. And I think I bring it to the restaurant, even though a restaurant is a business. It's, you know, a store where you sell food and hopefully you make a little bit of a profit and you move on. But I think for me, Joseph, it was much more, and it still is. And I think people feel that.
So as you mentioned, you were the sous chef at your first two restaurants, and then you took the reins at Felidia, which was your biggest venture yet. But at the time, there weren't many women doing that job. So how did you break down the walls?
Well, you're absolutely right. You know, the first restaurant, 71, was in Queens, and we hired a chef, and I became the sous chef for 10 years. I said, okay, because I loved cooking, cooked with grandma. I cooked, you know, during school in restaurants. But I said, I got to learn this, you know, how to run a restaurant kitchen. And for 10 years, I worked as a sous chef in our restaurants that we had in Queens. And then when we opened Felidia in 81, I felt that I was ready. And being a woman, I was a young woman, a young mother, a chef, Italian food. But you know, Joseph, I began cooking the regional food of Italy. You know, the food in America, the Italian food, it's mostly Italian American food. And it's delicious, but that's different. That's food of the immigrants, how they settled and what they found and how they cooked with the ingredients that they found. And in 81, I said, you know what? I can get a lot of the ingredients. I'm gonna cook the regional foods of Italy. Italy has 20 regions, so there's plenty of diversity. And if you travel to Italy, you know that the food there is somewhat different. And I think that sort of caught everybody's attention. I was doing polenta, risotto, gnocchi, things that were not known all that much. And I think that brought to the attention of the press. And you know, you journalists are curious.
Right. And I believe you did tell me, though, the risotto was a favorite of Julia Child, right?
Yes. One of the highlights was when Julia Child walked in with James Beard. Now, talking about grandiose people, they physically were also, you know, two big people. Uh-huh. And she came in, she wanted my mushroom risotto. She was curious, she wanted a good Italian risotto. And ultimately, when she ate it and they came back again, she wanted to learn how to cook it. And so I did, you know, she came over the house, we became friends. And we were friends until her very end.
And that helped spawn your career at PBS, right?
It certainly did. She asked me, of course, you know, Lidia. She had the MasterChef series going. And she had different chefs. She says, Lidia, I would like you to be on my show. And we did 2 episodes. And of course, one of them was the risotto. And I loved being with her, cooking with her, of course, being on camera and kind of talking to the camera was exciting. And ultimately the producer says, Lidia, you're pretty good. How about a show of your own? And that's how, Joseph, that's how it started, you know. And PBS, I love being on PBS, and I still am on PBS 20 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And also, do you have any great stories about James Beard to share?
Well, James Beard, he was a wonderful man. You know, he was a man that when he talked about food, and he was a big guy, you know, you kind of felt warmed. You kind of felt like, you know, you're being hugged by the words of food, or how he spoke about food, how he wrote about food. And now he was curious too, because, you know, he knew some French and he was all about American food. So Italian for him was also new. And but he was leaving the stage for Julia.
It sounds so strange to think about it now, but that Italian food was still a new thing then, essentially. Well, the type of Italian food that you're bringing to the
Regional
States.
Italian food was a new thing. It was really the risottos, the ossobucos, you know, something that's very common, the cacio e pepe. You know, it's very common now, but in those days, Italian-American food. Now, Italian-American food even now is delicious, it's popular, the meatballs, the eggplant parmigiana, the veal parmigiana, it's all delicious food, it's just different.
So speaking of your celebrity friends, your career working in kitchens goes very far back. I know you worked at 15 at a bagel store with a famous owner, or a bakery store, Walkens Bakery, and that was the father of Christopher Walken, right?
Exactly. And you know, in Astoria, because we came as immigrants in Astoria, Queens, and right across, catty corner across where I lived, was Walkens Bakery. And you know, I came here as a young 12-year-old, so high school, junior high school, and you know, you needed a little pocket money. So there was the bakery, and they had delicious products, really a German bakery. And so I lied. I told them I was 16 because I wasn't a big girl. And I asked if I could get a weekend job, you know, like Friday night or Saturday and Sunday, you know, when I was off from school. And they did. They gave me a job. And I began as a sales girl and then got into the back baking. And yet Christopher, there were three brothers, Ken, Glenn, and Christopher. And they would come on the weekend and they would help. But Christopher especially, he was in charge of the delivery of the wedding cakes.
Oh, wow. And are you still friends today?
We're still friends. He's a good cook.
Is he?
Yes.
That's great to know. So you gave up the reins as head chef at Felidia because you developed a problem with your knees, correct?
Yeah.
What is that like? Do you miss being in that
Well,
position?
you know, I think after 18 years, I was 18 years behind the range, just as we say it. And it was getting a little difficult physically. And so I said, okay, maybe I should, you know, find somebody. And it wasn't easy, Joseph. It wasn't easy to give my baby to somebody. But ultimately, I called a friend in Piemonte. And I told him that I'm looking for somebody that could replace me, that we could collaborate. I don't want somebody to do my cooking and I give him the recipe. I want to collaborate with something. I wanted something. And he said, Lidia, I have the right young man for you. And Fortunato Nicotra, who is born in Sicily but was raised in Torino, because even in Italy there was a lot of immigration up to North. Torino was the Fiat factory, and his parents found work there. So he had the tradition, regional tradition of Sicily, of southern Italy, which I love. And he was educated and worked in restaurants up in the north, in Piemonte. He even went to Germany. He worked in Michelin-starred restaurant. But he was young and very talented. But we communicated. He was ready to kind of, look at me as maybe a mentor, almost, or maybe as a mother, and let's do this together. And I couldn't be happier because, you know, he had all the energy that sort of was slowly going out of me, if you will. And he's still there, 20-some-odd years
And he's
after.
the co-author of your book, correct?
Well, the book, that's the idea of the book, you know, because this is my 13th book and recipe book. So why now Felidia? And this is maybe because it's coming closer to 39, 40 years to give credit to the people that help make Felidia what it is. Because as you said, for a restaurant to rest, to continue to be busy and well all these years, somebody had to work very hard at it. And it's about the team, and especially Fortunato has been carrying it on for more than 20 years now. And so he was very excited about it, about being part of a cookbook, getting involved in the recipes, because, Joseph, in a restaurant, even though these are all traditional, simple, straightforward recipes, when you put them in the restaurant, you kind of kick them up a notch, shall we say. But taking the recipes, these are recipes that we are not able to take off the Felidia menu, and kind of making a little retro and making them home cook accessible. That was the project, so that people, they can come to Felidia and find these recipes, the luxury and the deliciousness that Dodo does to them, but then they can go home and actually cook them at home.
Wow. So I know you've been in the industry for a long time, so there's highs and lows. I know that I read that you said you were quite devastated when the news about Mario Batali came out. Was that a tough time for you?
It was a very tough time. It was an extraordinarily tough time because I just, I was not all that close with him. I certainly didn't socialize with him. And it was hard. That it really hurt me, not only as a professional, as a woman chef, but it hurt my emotion, my sentiments. It was against all I stood for.
So I want to talk about your family, because they're front and center in the book. And when you're talking about your restaurant and how it's really a collaborative project, your family helped a lot with it too. So you write that your passion for the kitchen comes from your grandmother and your childhood in Italy. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why did she inspire you to cook?
Well, Joseph, I was born in Istria. So Istria is a little peninsula on the east of Venice. It's no longer Italy, it is now Croatia. But after World War II, Italy lost the war. The Paris Treaty designated the borders, and Istria was given to the newly formed communist Yugoslavia. Now, we were ethnic Italian, even though it's a border, it's kind of mixed ethnicity, but we were ethnic Italians. But we got caught. I was just born around the time we got caught behind the Iron Curtain, and life was difficult. My mother was a school teacher, my father a mechanic, and they were in the city, in the little city, but she put my brother and myself with grandma in the countryside. And food was scarce, so grandma provided the food for the whole family, not just us. So, this courtyard, we had chickens, we had ducks, we had goats. I would milk the goats in the morning with grandma. That was my cappuccino in the morning, coffee. We had 2 pigs. Every November there was the slaughter, made sausages, made prosciutto, made the blood sausage. I remember mixing, the blood after the animal was slaughtered right away. The blood was cooked immediately. And I would mix in that, put a little polenta, cornmeal in there, some raisins, some chocolates if she had. And she would send me, of course, to the garden, go get the potatoes, go get the beans, go get the sage. Then the seasonality. She would take me also to forage. I love that. Springtime, we would forage for wild asparagus, for nettles, fall time for mushrooms. And ultimately, then we cooked. She cooked, and I was there, whether I brought her the warm water or whether I, just helped us shape the gnocchi or whatever. I was alongside. And Joseph, when in 1956, my parents decided, okay, it's time to move on. We went to Trieste because that was right on the other side of the borders where we had family left, but they didn't allow the whole family, just my mother, my brother, and I, because they knew that the whole family would not return. So they left my father as a hostage. And about a week after, my father escaped the border, came, he was shot at, the scent dogs, everything, but we ultimately made it. And there we were in Trieste. We were with some family in Trieste, but I realized that, I'm not going back, and I hadn't said goodbye to grandma, to my goats, to my friends. So I think that food for me kind of remained that connector. I started cooking because bringing the smells, the aromas, the taste brought me back to that courtyard with grandma. And I missed her so. I kept on cooking and remembering all that she taught me. And then, and then on the passion for communicating with food and sharing food and so on. So I think that my passion for food began there. And then, of course, the training that went thereafter.
And does part of you, this is basically the question I was going to ask you, you took the words out of my mouth, but I think when I cook, for example, it directly correlates to my mom and my grandmother. My mom's deceased now, but some of my fondest memories of my childhood are cooking in the kitchen, and my grandmother taught me how to cook. She's an immigrant from Mexico. So it connects me not only to my culture, but to my childhood. And I think, I'm still feeding that inside me. Do you still think?
You'll always feed it. And it's going to be your comfort zone. And it's going to be your zone when you're longing for something, and food is that kind of food is comfort. Food is memories, it communicates. And absolutely. So if you think you're going to change, no, you're going to keep on doing that and do it because it feels good sometimes, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay.
And you write about the character of your mom too. So she helped babysit your kids when you were putting Felidia together. She worked as a hostess. She worked in the coat room. You said she passed out pamphlets on the street. What kept her believing in you?
I think that the fact, as Italians, and I think as Mexicans too, family is, we have to be family. Otherwise, who are we without the family? And I think coming here, especially, we really didn't have any family. We had nobody. We were brought here by the Catholic Relief Services and the Red Cross, and they took us, found an apartment for us, and so we didn't. So we were really close together, supporting each other. And then as the family grew, as I got married and I had my children, and we got involved into things, we just got closer in a sense that I needed her more. And she saw that. She wanted to be part of that. She wanted to be part of actually making those gnocchi, but also taking care of the children, of my children. They would all come to the restaurant in the afternoon, have their meal after school and whatever. She would help to do what? Time to go to bed. They would go home, finish their homework, and we would stay and work. And my mother ultimately lived with me, moved in, my mother and my father. Then my father passed away. But she's 99 and she lives with me still. Wow. Now we take care of grandma.
Wow. And I know you went through a divorce, and when I read in your book, you said that forgiveness was a very important thing for you. How did you forgive and move on?
Well, I think, it was difficult for me, a divorce, because I'm not of that genre, you kind of, and we were married 28 years, so it's not that, but I think, it was just a divide in the road. It had to, he wanted to do one thing, relax, go back to Italy. I was just kind of beginning and, in television and working, and I loved it. And so we parted ways. But once, there's always some animosity, some difficulties. You got to clear that. Mm-hmm. And I think that, when you feel sentiments like anger, like hate, these are ugly sentiments. And when you feel it, they don't go to the person that you feel it towards. They stay with you. You got to get rid of them. You got to eradicate that and, not feel them anymore and kind of say, okay, that chapter is closed. Let's forgive and let's move on. And we were friends until he died. He would come over for the holidays and all of that. So it kind of worked, but it was, spiritual and praying and forgiving was a big part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went through my parents' divorce, so from the other side, but I think forgiveness is an important message for sure. So when I think of you, you're in a way, is the embodiment of the American dream. From coming as a refugee, my grandmother, coming from Mexico, she was the first woman who was married who finished nursing school. They didn't want her to go to school because she was married and thought she wouldn't graduate, but she did it. And you've accomplished so much. I just think, we live in a really interesting time because the questions of the contributions of immigrants are really front and center. How does that make you feel to see that?
I just about every day when I hear something, I can't help but go back into my story, into my history, and think, but I was like that. I went through that. I was given a chance. And look, if you give somebody a chance, somebody to be free, somebody to develop, a place for their family to live comfortably, they will work, they will make it happen. So I can't help but feel really perplexed, and because America is all about immigrants. It's, that's the beauty of America. And Joseph, the most beautiful part is in America that we are this kind of, if you will, network of different cultures. And yet, within this context, we're allowed to be who we are. We can speak our language, we can practice our church, we can sing our songs, we can have our parades. And, I don't think it happens any place in the world that, you're part of a bigger whole and yet you can be your cultural self.
So I wanted to ask you a couple questions about the food. You write that octopus is one thing that never leaves the appetizer menu. Why is it an essential?
I think I was kind of raised on octopus. It was seasonal. I had an uncle who was a fisherman, and he would bring the octopus at home, live octopus, and we always ate it. We made it into a salad with potatoes, with boiled potatoes. And I think America is just, by now they discovered it, had begun to discover this delicious fish, octopus. And America loves it now. So it's what was for me as a child normal, mundane, when I was lucky enough to have it, now became a delicacy, and that's for me as a chef, that's interesting to see.
So Bolognese, it's a very common sauce that appears in a lot of menus. So what really sets it apart? What makes it a great Bolognese?
Bolognese sauce is a sauce of 2 or 3 different kinds of ground meat, and usually it's the muscles, the tough part, and it's one way of really tenderizing it and making it delicious, and then dressing a lot of pasta with it. So a little bit went a long way. But the question of a good Bolognese is the steps, the onions, the soffriggere, the little bit of carrots, little bay leaves, rosemary, cloves, and so on down the line. You build the layers, and the perking away, the slow cooking, 2.5 hours, 3 hours for a good Bolognese, until the meat has sort of given all, and then with all the herbs, and then taking it back in, and you have this kind of velvety sauce and these morsels of delicious meat. And you make a nice piadina, I would say, of gnocchis. That used to be Sunday for us, and it was delicious.
So you wrote that pasta primavera was your children's favorite. What makes it such a crowd pleaser?
Well, ever more now even, but primavera, first of all, it means spring. So one would think of all the spring elements, which is the peas and the string beans and the zucchini and the zucchini flower. So you choose, whatever the fruit of spring was. We call them the primizie, the first of. And with a little bit of garlic and oil and a little bit of butter and grated Grana Padano cheese, kids can it's one way of getting the kids to eat some vegetables. Because if you saute the vegetables enough and with onions, they become sweet. And then, of course, the pasta is the carrier of it all, and you can make it in small pieces so that children would eat it. So I love it. I think it's a great restaurant dish. Still, pasta with vegetable, really people love it.
Mm-hmm. And so your frozen peach Bellini, how did you come up with the idea for putting the gelato in?
But it's as a chef, you just kind of a Bellini. Venice, whether you go to, it's a peach puree, and then you put the prosecco in there, and basically that's a Bellini. I think we do a sorbetto or an ice cream, kind of magnifies it, makes it creamier, and it takes it to another dimension. And I think that that's what a cookbook, and I hope that with the cookbook I encourage the viewers, the readers out there to feel free and maybe to get a little bit inventive in it. We have a butternut squash martini in there. So, you say, oh, butternut squash, yeah. For fall, you puree it. Butternut squash is a little bit on the sweet side. You can cook with a little molasses, whatever.
Right.
And, you make a great martini for the fall, for Thanksgiving.
And so one thing I was interested in reading too, you're not a big fan of chocolate.
Chocolate is not, it's not one of my I like good chocolate, but it's not one of my favorite.
Me either.
Oh, no?
No.
Oh, I love fruits.
I do too.
I love fruits, baked, cooked, whatever. And I like when they're condensed. I like them with cinnamon. I like them in the strudel. A nice roasted pear with some iced vanilla ice creams when the pear is still warm. That's delicious. And I like simple, straight kind of cake, like shortcake.
So just a few quick questions just for fun. What's your favorite thing to cook?
Oh, I do. It depends on the mood, on the season, on who's coming. But I would say pasta.
Pasta. Do you have a favorite cocktail?
Yeah, I like a Negroni, a nice Negroni.
Do you have a guilty pleasure food?
Yeah, I can, but it varies. I like my prosciutto. I like now and then foie gras, even though it's questionable now. But that's something we didn't have. But we ate liver. We ate a lot of liver. When we slaughtered the ducks, it was usually in a frittata form, or the pigs, with a lot of smothered onions. The livers we ate. I like truffles now and then, but give me a good crispy bread, semolina bread, and a nice piece of grana padano, a few slices of prosciutto, a good glass of Tokai. I'm okay.
But what's your favorite food that's not Italian?
Thai. I love Thai food. Yes. I think it's so diversified, it's so intriguing. They use a lot of vegetables, unlike, the Italians too. So I like the spiciness of it.
I agree with that.
You do?
Yes.
Good.
Well, thank you so much for coming today. So I just want to remind folks at home that Felidia is available on bookshelves now. And Lidia has also shared some recipes with us that you can find on salon.com. Have a great day.